for wafers, which is an interim, process commodity in the solar supply chain, 95+% come from China.
Really?
So if we cannot get wafers from China, game over. So unless we start at some point reshoring, building our own supply chain, we will not be able to get ahead, and it's a matter of survival. So I think, coming back to our beloved Congress, the federal one, we need action.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Clean Techies, the podcast. This is episode 38, and today's episode is a conversation with Martin Pochtaruk, the president and founder of Heliene. Heliene is a US-based solar panel manufacturer, and today's episode largely focuses around the supply chain issues that are faced currently by the solar industry. Again, this was recorded a couple weeks ago, but this topic is still, I think, pretty relevant for what's going on now. But again, a very interesting conversation with Martin, really shed a lot of light on the industry. Before we do get into the conversation, want to, of course, make mention of our sponsors, Next Wave Partners. Next Wave are experts in the talent acquisition and recruitment areas across the climate tech, renewables, and ESG spaces globally. So if your team is growing or you personally are looking to make a career change, you can consider reaching out to Next Wave. You can do that a couple different ways. You can go to their website, next-wavepartners.com, and reach out through there, or you can also reach out to one of their consultants directly through their LinkedIns, which you can find them on LinkedIn as well, Next Wave Partners. So again, without any further delay, let's get into the show. All right, welcome to the show, Martin. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you for calling me for this conversation. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to have this discussion. I think it's quite timely given some of the events in the world. So let's start with, could you just give kind of a bit of an introduction on yourself and kind of what you're doing now, and then we can get into kind of how you got into the space as well.
Thank you. So again, my name is Martin Pochtaruk. I'm originally from Argentina, but I worked for a couple of decades for a multinational that had me relocated to northern Italy, then to Houston, Texas, then to Western Canada, and from the oil and gas life into other forms of steel manufacturing until back in early 2010, I started up Heliene. So that's when the company built its first factory in Sault Ste. Marie, that's in Ontario. Part of the city is on the Canadian side, part of the city is on the Michigan Upper Peninsula, so right on the border. Back in 2017, we took over an existing factory in Minnesota, and then made an investment in 2018 that was for a new manufacturing line. That was the first manufacturing line being built as a response to the Trump era 201 safeguard import duties to create jobs and manufacturing solar modules in the US. In September of 2021, we started an expansion of that building and that line that will be ready by July of this year, fast approaching. And then late in the summer of 2021, we took over. Also was an opportunity to build modules in Florida in a factory that a company that made the investment and the equipment left behind. And with that, we started up a third location in Riviera Beach, Florida, where we manufacture heterojunction modules. So overall capacity by July, 900 megawatts, all North American made.
And when you say 900 megawatts, is that in terms of 900 megawatts per month, per year?
That's, sorry, when we talk about capacity, we always talk about it annually, and it's not even correct, right? Because it all depends what module you made. So to account for that, so we produce pieces of glass per hour, and depending how many cells you have, how many watts, the size of the module will be the total output. So that would be an average considering all the sizes that we make.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So I guess what ended up, what was the impetus to found Heliene? Like why did you go from your background and then decide that, hey, this is what I need to do next?
So the short answer is because it's a good business. The long answer, I can give you several, but the one that actually I think is the most relevant is that is the right thing to do, right? So I worked in steelmaking. It's a Victorian industry that pollutes, considerably and has been polluting. However, we all use steel and need it. We can say that is my work towards redemption. In reality, I mean, it was a business opportunity, right? So back then, the province of Ontario, which is where we live, and we're sorry, that's my office manager barking at passers-by. It was an opportunity to manufacture for the Ontario feed-in tariff program, and that is what was the first opportunity that myself, together with my business partner, found interesting to tackle. I've been in manufacturing my whole life. This is what I know, and again, we saw an opportunity to make a product that actually people want.
Yeah. Well, what I guess maybe I missed it, but what does the process look like to get into manufacturing from, like, you basically created this from scratch, is my understanding, kind of built this. How did that look? Because I know that in the climate tech space, there are many hardwares that need to be created and technologies that need to be innovated to actually create a more carbon neutral economy in the future. So I think that manufacturing is a very difficult thing to do, especially you can't just start up manufacturing with $10,000. It takes a bit more capital, right? So I'd be keen to hear like that process.
It takes a few million. I mean, not to say dozens. So manufacturing of solar modules is an assembly process where you bring components and in a highly robotized, automated manufacturing line, you put it together. So there's no solar cell manufacturing in North America. So the heart of the product, which is what actually generates the electrons, comes from overseas, right? In Heliene's case, it would be Taiwan, it would be Malaysia, but others bring it from other countries. Not China, because of anti-dumping and countervailing import duties that have been in place since 2012 in the US. So that would be a non-possible origin, but all other origins are fine. So the manufacturing process happens in very automated lines that are very repetitive. For instance, the manufacturing line that we are installing in Minnesota, that will start up by mid-July, will produce a solar module every 25 seconds. That is pretty fast.
Yeah.
So what this means is that what you have is mainly robots, and it's a line that you start with a piece of glass, and that moves as a tray in the cafeteria, right? It moves along, and in every station there is something into it at a very fast pace. So what this allows is for, as I said, a highly repetitive, controlled process where each step happens at a very high speed with very high precision, over and over and over.
Got it.
And also the other point, which is important, is that there's almost no manual intervention. So this allows for a repetitive product that is made independent of the judgment of a human.
Got it. Understood. So I guess what does Heliene do differently that other solar panel manufacturers do? Like, what really separates kind of what you're doing from the other manufacturers?
The way we conduct business. So the product is comparable to the best, so basically second to none. but comparable. So, you can have a very good Vietnamese or Malaysian module, and from the performance point of view, will be comparable. What we do that others don't is we're in North America and provide the module just in time to project site. On 75+% of what we sell goes into infrastructure projects, ground mounts, solar installations that are built with a very high percentage of debt. What that means is that we're not competing in the open market on price. We are basically competing within the approved vendor list of the lender. 20+% of what we sell goes into the C&I, the commercial and industrial, as well as the the residential market, the distribution, particularly product coming from Florida, being a heterojunction solar module plant, goes into residential. It's a fully black module. So what we do is we provide that, reliance, that the ability to be here and respond to lead times that our competitors cannot. So when we ship a truckload of modules to a client, right from the Midwest where we are, to the Northeast, well, that will be what, a 12 to 16 hour trip. It's not 16 weeks across the ocean.
Yeah, understood. So basically, the proximity to the market that's requiring it, right? That's
the reliability, the flexibility, right?
Yeah.
The ability. If the project is delayed, then we'll direct that product to somebody else and then manufacture again for a particular client. So that flexibility, that the ability to partner up with clients to be part of the construction schedule and work with them through it, is what differentiates us from somebody else.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I think maybe it makes sense here to move to, I think the main reason most people probably come to listen is, could you walk us through kind of what are, at least on the surface level, the major supply chain issues right now facing solar, right? Can you kind of maybe give us the landscape, because a lot of people listening may not be experts in this space. So if you can give us the landscape and explain kind of some of the dilemmas, and then we can go on to the next part. We'll kind of break down how we could fix this.
Yes, and what people might not be aware of how things have changed lately. So the process itself has not changed much. I would say the size of the solar cells and the size of the modules have changed, but not the technology. However, the supply chain and the demand versus supply dynamics is what has changed and will continue to change. So when you look at what was happening in between 2009, 2010, and mid-2021, supply was always bigger than demand. And that was a constant. So pricing was very easy to forecast because it was at the level that was quoted today or lower, right? Because the only constant, as we saw, is that price was going down, costs were going down, consecutive price with it. And what happened through 2021, the first one was the general maritime freight disruption. So there has been and continues to be an imbalance on the amount of traffic from ports around the world. So there's more cargo than there are ships, and then because there's more ships than there were before, the ports are not fast enough to unload and reload. So we have delays for a boat to berth and unload of 4 or 5 weeks each way. That has compounded over a year and a half. So a transit that used to be, let's say, from any port in the southeast of Asia to a western port in Canada, US, of 7 weeks, now is 15, sometimes more. So what And again, shipping companies want to get paid by the day the same amount. So if before you were paying for a 6-week, 7-week transit time, and now it's 16, the price is much higher. So we used to pay between $2,500 and $3,000 per container to cross the Pacific. Now that is $20,000 to $23,000. So that is a massive increase. Many may have heard President Biden actually address this subject in his State of the Union message, where he was actually calling on the Department of Justice to investigate the reason why shipping rates across the globe have increased so much. So that is the main first event that we faced during 2021. Increase in shipping rates beyond anything that has ever been forecasted.
And was that due to the pandemic specifically and increased demand, or was it just something that was going to happen eventually?
I would say the delays are in part produced by the pandemic because, for example, there have been ports in Asia that were closed entirely to contain the pandemic for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. So many ports in China or in Vietnam or in Malaysia have been closed until not too long ago, right? So that was one issue. The other issue is that at the beginning of this acceleration in volume, many cargo container ships were parked aside because basically the volume through the 2020 part of the pandemic was much smaller. So there was no reason for all of these boats to be traveling. And then manning them and having them ready took some time. And now it's estimated, and this is not I'm just paraphrasing what I'm reading about it, it might take 2 years to catch up, right? So you have these delays in ports that they're not going to be solved overnight.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the first part of the problem.
It almost seems like that problem is so far out. 2 years is a long time, right? In 2 years, there could be other localized solutions that could solve the problem.
And there could be other problems compounding, right? So we just don't know. So the short of it is you cannot forecast the maritime freight going down anytime soon. Hopefully it's not going beyond what we're paying today, but thinking that this is something that will be solved by, I'm just picking up a date for sound effect. If we say, well, by June of 2022, this is going to be solved, no, there's no way that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we really cannot forecast on that because really nobody knows. So that was the first, I would say, shock affecting the pricing of everything. It's not only solar modules, but basically that has affected the price of anything that is moved around the planet, because the maritime freight affects all goods that are shipped around. The other part was, the imbalance and inflation on even regional goods like, steel. Steel has demand supply roller coasters. So when we look at where is the price of steel now, versus a year and a half ago, is well over what it used to be. So that is also affecting, racking or other components that are used in solar installations. When we come back to solar, we talk about maritime shipping cost. The other part is the increase in global demand for solar that is happening faster than the construction of the supply chain to go from polysilicon all the way to solar modules. So we see China, for example, going from 45 gigawatts or whatever it was that they consumed in 2021 to an estimated 100 gigawatts in 2022. That's more than a 100% increase year over year. So we are not the only ones using this product. Countries in Latin America going from 100 200 megawatts of demand to 2-3 gigawatts in the year. So that is, if you look at Bloomberg this morning, actually had a new forecast for consumption in 2022, bringing it around 265 gigawatts. So that, what brings is, again, I don't know if you look lately to the price of polysilicon, but polysilicon, which is the source material from where ingots are made, cut into wafers that are transformed into cells that are, embedded into solar modules, so it's the main source material, is at the highest level since 2011. So all of the, cost down that we've seen since 2011 to 2021, it lost it all. It's at the highest level it has been in the last 11 and a half years. So what that shows is that transitively, the price of wafers is at a record high, the price of solar cells is high, and the price of solar modules that use solar cells, as well. So all of this is what we find globally. When then you look at the US in particular, we are constrained of the origin of polysilicon because of the measure adopted and pushed by the US Congress under this called, the acronym for it is WRO, which basically constrains, is an order to US Customs to question the origin of polysilicon. So the US, or Canada in the same manner, have a restriction on the possible origin of polysilicon because of the alleged slave labor practices in the Xinjiang province. The Xinjiang province produces, 35%, 40% of the global polysilicon. So for cells that we are to use to make modules in the US, we cannot use that. Therefore, we need to look at other sources. And for that, there is an extra cost. So that is something that is specific to the US that makes the solar cells that we use to make modules in the US, or cells that use globally to bring modules to the US, at a higher cost. So, and this is something that, is relatively new, has been in place for a few months. And there is a lot of talk about, modules being retained at customs because they cannot prove the origin of the polysilicon, right? And that is why. So when we mentioned the reasons quickly, right? So we have a global demand that is very strong. Therefore, the cost of the product is higher because there's a more market pull for it. Then you have the added spice of not being able to use Xinjiang province polysilicon for good reasons. That is another hurdle. And overall, the maritime shipping global condition that is making moving stuff more expensive.
Okay, got it. Well, how much does maybe this is too much into the weeds with the ports. I've heard a lot of talk about the issue with not being able to get trucks in there to get things off the ships. Is that something that you want to comment on? Is it worth kind of discussing in this breath?
I would say that once you get it off a boat, whether generally, at least in our case, we move by train, we don't move by truck. And we're not having, so far, we're having issues. I don't know of any particular port that has any tracking issues. I wouldn't be aware.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. I guess so. So then maybe what would be interesting to hear is, I guess from your perspective, what would you say are the potential solutions here to fix this? Whether that's government regulations or lack of regulations, maybe relaxing things. I'd just be keen to hear kind of generally some of the things you think could be taken in near term and then maybe more mid to long term to solve these problems.
Some of the things are extremely complex, right? So the shipping cost is not going to go down now with the added spice of oil and oil refined products increasing in cost more than 100%. So if you look at where was the price of oil 2 weeks ago, I think was in the $60 to $80 per barrel level, and we are today at what, 125. So that is going to affect shipping. So shipping within the US, gasoline is going up, diesel is going up, and these same boats that we are trying to move cheaper and faster, actually it's going to be more expensive to move them, not cheaper. So I don't think there is an immediate solution besides loading and unloading boats faster. There are no new ports under construction, so we don't have the ability to say, well, there's a new port in Oregon or I don't know in British Columbia that is going to open that was never there. Having more places to load and unload would solve the congestion. However, these are infrastructure investments that are long out. So, should the federal government in the US, in Canada, invest in more ports? Probably. I don't know in the US, but at least in Canada, the environmental resistance to building more ports is very strong. So
yeah, I believe
that will be approved.
Yeah, I believe it's very tough, and I believe there's also a very strong union kind of. I don't know exactly the details, but I was listening to a podcast the other day that described the unions being very kind of particular about how the ports are run, and there's a lot of things that are difficult there. I guess to me though, I mean, this is maybe zooming out kind of really widely, right? If we're having these issues right now because of this pandemic and because of other various things here, wouldn't we be better off almost doing what we can to, again, this is a difficult topic, but doing what we can to invest in building as much of this stuff locally, because the ports are a massive investment, right? That's relying on the consistent future of global trade, right? Which, again, this is not really the topic of this podcast, but I personally believe that global trade is going to become more and more shaky as the decades roll on, personally, right? So I guess I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that. What would you, if you had a magic wand to wave and like decide where the funding is going, right, what would you think?
Well, I would hope Senator Lujan can be healthy and back in Senate soon, and we can somehow move what used to be called the Build Back Better, like legislation into a whole thing, pieces. I mean, somehow, at least the climate package that was not under discussion, however, as it was in this big omnibus bill, it bounced like a ping pong ball, right? If we can have, as again, the president called in his State of the Union address, the environmental part, the climate package within the formerly known Build Back Better omnibus bill brought back to Senate. So I understand that it is in Finance Committee right now, but again, until we have 50 senators that could be at the chamber, there's not going to be a vote on anything. So, hopefully that's what my magic wand will do, is to bring, the investment tax credit for developers up to 30%, extended to 2031, incentives for the manufacturing supply chain. to be able to get, REC polysilicon, REC silicon, Wacker, all the polysilicon mining companies to restart the process. So the polysilicon process is 3-4 years out, right? So because it's a massive capital expenditure to get that going. And we all know that the moment an incentive like the one Senator Ossoff proposed, right, is out, that is there are going to be a lot of other people, not only Heliene, increasing manufacturing capacity in the US. So again, modern North American manufacturing is highly automated. Therefore, there are not as many jobs as people would think, because there's not a manual job. You don't make solar modules, you don't make solar cells manually. So these are capital intensive, highly automated processes. But we still talking about 30 to 100,000 jobs, that the highly paying jobs that the solar manufacturing supply chain will bring. So there's a letter that was sent to President Biden Friday last week by the Solar Energy Manufacturing for America Alliance, which Heliene is part of, thanking him for at least mentioning the Made in America plan, the Made in America wish. Now we need Senate to actually act, so that then there is the bureaucratic machinery to bring those legislations into actual plans that we can all work on and within.
I always find this so difficult, because obviously regulation can be such a spur, right, for any industry, right? It's kind of the way that America was built in many ways, right? We kind of pushed for certain things.
I was going to say, so when you look at the oil and gas business, they've been subsidized. They have been subsidized for 130 years. So this shouldn't be scary for anyone, because this has been done over and over.
Oh yeah, and I think that's an issue, obviously, that many people just don't understand. I think that's important to bring awareness to. But even on the regulatory side of things, right? I find that in the you look at maybe zooming out a little further, right? You look at the interest of capitalism in general, right, is to kind of preserve its dominance. When something becomes strong, it then tries to preserve its dominance, especially through maybe in influencing policy, right? But you look at, we talked about it before the show, but you look at some of the supply chain issues faced with commodities, with grain, for example, in Africa, right, during the Ukraine crisis, right? This is because largely, some people relied on one specific source for their resources, right? And globally speaking, we don't have this kind of flexible, I don't know how you'd say, grid or whatever, of different resources that we can kind of pull from. There's not many options, right? And I think that policy makers, obviously their job, it's important for democracy to move at somewhat of a slower pace, right? We don't want to have things being able to change too quickly. But I think that balance, to me, is something super interesting. I always wonder, where is the best balance to have quick action, right? I believe there's many people speculating on the quick actions that could be taken to fix the supply chain issues with some of the stacking of containers, et cetera. But I don't know if you have comments, generally speaking, on this kind of flexible, like being able to build a more resilient grid or supply chain.
It is a requirement, and we're seeing what the problem is. We saw how unstable or fragile the electrical grid was in Texas last winter. And this winter, touch on wood, nothing happened. But it only took one ice storm, and the entire state, the largest and strongest, went dark, right? So the reliance, and when you look at the Department of Defense, right, the Department of Defense in the US has a mandate to be energy independent, to be able to keep the lights on, even if the rest of the country, for whatever reason, might go dark. So that reliance, we need it, in many ways to be energy independent. What you have in a country that is less developed, what you have in Mexico, for example, is that homeowners are installing solar on the roof, which are generally flat, left and right, because the grid is not reliable at all. So not only they have blackouts frequently, they have brownouts too. Power might come in and out, so your appliance is actually fried because this instability,
yes.
right? So that is solved by the public taking their own hands to solve their own problems and basically having that backup power generation at a distributed level. So whether we start talking about making our electric grid more reliable and how we get that, I think that applies to all industries, right? And the fact that right now the US government is discussing with Venezuela to buy oil from them again when it has been banned for a decade shows that, as you mentioned, there are not too many options. Right. So right now, right, and sadly Venezuela is okay to deal with, right? And I don't have any more hair to pull. I lost it all. But the short, coming back to the supply chain in solar, is that we rely for wafers, which is an interim process commodity in the solar supply chain. 95+% come from China.
Really?
So if we cannot get wafers from China, game over. So unless we start at some point reshoring, building our own supply chain, we will not be able to get ahead, and it's a matter of survival. So I think, coming back to our beloved Congress, the federal one, we need action.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What about this is something I think interesting here. What about the way, I'm not sure how familiar people are with how solar works, but typically people sell PPAs, right? They do financial modeling and they decide on the price of their energy. That's largely dependent on the cost of the solar modules, right? Which is the reason why solar is inexpensive now, is because of the advancements that have been made in the past decades. But what has happened to these developers? Because these are, going through the process. What is it? 3 years, sometimes 3 to 4 years to build a solar farm. Sometimes because of the interconnection process, largely, right? So what is happening to the people who have kind of priced out their PPAs at a certain level, and now they're seeing, as they get to the point of construction, that the module costs are going up, or maybe the EPC firms are really, really struggling to be able to fulfill what they promised? Can you just walk us through some of those challenges and what's the consequences?
Of course. So the consequences might be that the business model of that particular power generation station, which happens to be solar, is not sound anymore. And it might not just be because of the solar modules. As I said, steel is more than 100% more expensive than it was before. So it's not only the solar module that is 25% higher, your racking will be 50% higher. Your cabling that uses copper, that is at a record high price right now, will be higher. All of your components are at a higher price. The moving of your humans to go to your site to install will be more expensive because gasoline is and will continue to go up. So the worst that can happen is that you will lose that PPA because you cannot build at the price you promised. The reality is that at the price of oil and gas globally right now, right, the comparison to oil and gas is even better than it was before. Because
I guess I never thought
generating power with oil or with gas is ridiculously expensive. Right? It increased 100% from 2 months ago, 100%. So will that, give the opportunity to people to renegotiate PPAs? I would say it should, right? So you see, in Europe in particular, that is reliant on Russian oil and gas, is that is also the alternative. Okay, if I don't use the gas that comes with the pipeline, which is cheaper, then I need to bring liquefied natural gas from, I don't know, Canada or Qatar. So that will even be more expensive.
Yeah,
so
I think
the cost of energy is going to go up enormously this year.
Yeah, so either way, there's going to be an increase in the costs. I guess, wouldn't it also be safe to say that, generally speaking, since this is pretty much it's going to affect everybody will have to renegotiate PPAs, essentially. It's not like only a few shops are going to say, hey, by the way, we need to renegotiate this. It's going to be kind of across the board, right?
It's going to be across the board, and solar will still be cheaper, right? So coming back to what you compare it to. So if you compare it to oil or natural gas power generation, it will be cheaper because the cost of those commodities is going up by the hour.
Yeah, I don't like to hear that, but it's
but
true.
It's true. I mean, it's not it's not really up to us, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's not that we can solve it, but again, look at where the price of oil is today.
Yeah. One maybe large last thing that I want to kind of go over is, especially with your experience in the steel industry before, when it comes to building all these solar farms, right? Our goal, generally speaking, if you listen to most people, I just finished Bill Gates's book. When we look at electrifying everything, right, it's going to require clean generation, right? If we're building millions and millions of solar panels, there's a lot of steel that goes into that, right? What is being done to help decrease the how do you say, it's called the carbon emissions that's part of that process to create the steel? I forget
footprint. Yeah, of course. No, yeah, the carbon footprint of the product. So there's no steel in solar modules at all. So you will have steel on the racking, and that will be about it. So in solar modules, we have aluminum on the frames that could be minimized, but you still need to have mechanical resistance. That is mainly because a solar module is a glorified window, right? So the glass itself will not be as resistant unless you have a frame providing that sturdiness to it. So what I think it is a very strong solution is the reshoring, as we were talking, because right now we're moving all of these materials across the planet, right? So the heaviest part, which is the structural part of a solar module, is the glass itself. We do not have solar glass manufacturing in North America. So the last factory that used to make it was AGC, a Japanese company out of a Tennessee factory, and they closed it around 2014. So right now, all of the glass is coming from overseas. So transported by, gas guzzling container boats. So there is right now a project is working on getting funding to manufacture solar glass in the Manitoba to Minnesota border. Because there is a sand deposit for the purity that is needed for solar glass right outside of Lake Winnipeg, which is literally 2 hours from our Heliene, Minnesota factory. So it's rather convenient, but by pure chance. So should we have glass made in North America, then we can actually say, right, that is. And again, Manitoba has over 90%, where this factory will be located, has over 90% of its power generation coming from either hydro or wind. So that will be, renewable power generated to to fuel it.
Yeah.
So, being able to fuel these factories, and again with steel, the first factory I worked, at is electric and has been electric since the 1950s, right? So we only see in North America, and well, in India as well, in China, factories that are that have coke ovens that are fueled by coal. But I would say in the rest of the planet, that was ended around the 1950s. So, the electrification is possible. So, one of the largest steel makers in the US is called Nucor, Nucor. They have been, using electrical furnaces from the very beginning. They never had coke making. So the legacy steel makers still do. So is it possible to electrify, steel making? Of course it is.
Yeah, I think there was an interesting project that Bill Gates was investing in where they used concentrated solar to. It's obviously very difficult because it depends on the heat, but they were making steel. I think they were testing some things. I'm interested to see that. I think it's a very challenging issue, right? Because obviously the goal is to get to this kind of, some people call it donut, the circular economy, right? And it'll be interesting to see how those developments happen. We're running out of time here, but maybe if you have any final thoughts, I'd be keen to hear kind of when solar panels are done, to what extent can we recycle these? What can be done to kind of bring them back to life?
And that is something that everybody's concerned, and rightly so, because the deployment is happening in very large numbers. And we don't have the recycling issue today. And in fact, there's nothing to recycle or very little, because solar panels can be useful forever. So there are installations made in the US in 1975, and those modules are still producing electrons. Of course, they are not pretty and they are not very powerful, but they can still be used. So the process of recycling is possible. So what you have in the very few places where this is done, and so it's being done already in Europe. We don't see it in North America much because there's no real volume for it to be a profitable business. But what we have is basically a grinder that will grind the glass. So first of all, you take the aluminum frame that's fully recyclable. You melt aluminum to make more aluminum every day of the week. So that's not new. Then, you grind the glass that has everything laminated together. And then you have to separate. So recyclers of electronics and other products separate, whether it is magnetically or by weight, the polymers that are all what is laminated behind from the glass. Again, the glass, which is, once you take the frame out, the glass is 97% of the weight that is remaining on the module. So when you separate the glass by weight, you have, less than 3%, let's say 3% of the total weight left. And what you have there is basically the polymers, so the encapsulant and backsheet, and the broken solar cells. So that can also be separated. So you get the silicon on one side and the polymer on the other. The polymer can be reused, recycled, no different than the Coca-Cola empty bottles or any other brand that you drink. When you put it to recycle, that's what they will do. They will grind it to then melt it and make a plastic again with it. And the silicon can be reused. So it's this simply to say is that there's no toxicity in the solar modules that are made since 2012. So there was lead on the ribbon before then, but after then, the level of toxicity are below acceptable levels or legislated regulated levels of toxicity. So you can recycle 100% of it.
Well, that's actually interesting. I never knew that. It's crazy. That's pretty much entirely recyclable. That's crazy to hear.
It is. It is, yes.
So that's awesome. But man, this has been very interesting. I guess, do you have any final thoughts you want to close off with, or any kind of last things you want to mention?
The most of the resistance, or the not necessarily resistance, but counterproductive discussions that I'm involved into lately are because they budgeted lower cost, lower pricing, and they cannot find it. Is simply to say that the only constant is change, and if we're not prepared to confront the change and look for solutions, then we don't have a job.
Yeah, no, I think that's something I've learned through some of the readings I've done. I think Nassim Taleb, his book about the black swan, right, predicting these unpredictable things, and understanding the importance of resiliency and flexibility being very important. I think it's given me a new way to look at the world. So I think that it's probably, I guess I am a little bit worried that with the massive increases in these costs, that there will be some of these companies' funding partners who didn't realize what they were getting into, kind of like 2008. And we might see some places consolidate, which might not be the worst thing, right? But I think that my concern will be that there will be more negative reaction from many people saying, "Oh, look, it did it again," right? It's not working. So I think we should probably work on solving this for the next time. But other than that, thank you so much, Martin, for coming on. I really appreciate it, and we'll have to have you on again in the future.
Thank you very much. It was a really interesting conversation. I look forward to the next one. Thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining on today's episode with Martin. Really hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you would like to hear more conversations like this, if this is your first time here, please do subscribe and tap the bell for notifications, depending on where you're listening. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, we do ask for you to please rate and review the show. It really helps us to increase our reach and to expand our our listener base, to help include other people in the space. Again, the whole goal here is to help educate people in the space. So really do appreciate that, and you're helping us do that. If you're interested, please do share this episode with somebody who might find this relevant. You can consider getting more involved by joining our Slack channel. Again, another bunch of other professionals in the space. Good place to connect. It's also a good place to reach me if you prefer. And subscribe to the newsletter, which comes out on the 27th of every month, with different topics that we dive deeply into, with the support of my friend Randy to help do that. And then please do, of course, reach out to Martin on LinkedIn and connect with him regarding what Heliene is doing. You can reach out to them and check their website out as well. And of course, you can reach me with any questions you have on Twitter. So I think just a quick note for upcoming next week, we will be having an episode with David Jackson at Winnow, which is a company that is helping commercial restaurants reduce food waste. So a really interesting conversation coming up in the near future. Stay tuned for that. And we'll see you next time on Clean Tech is the Podcast.